Hi, welcome to FAFSA walkthrough for the 2026-2027 academic year with Get to College. My name is Kierstan Dufour, and I work for Get to College, a college access nonprofit organization located in Mississippi that's a program of the Woodward Hines Education Foundation. Today, we're going to show you how to complete the 26-27 FAFSA, which applies for the financial aid for the fall semester of 2026, spring semester 2027, and summer semester 2027. What you're going to see in this video is a walkthrough of the FAFSA line by line for a dependent student, which will require parent contributor information. In this video, we are going to be starting as a student and inviting the parent as a contributor. So let's get started.
Okay, so this is the studentaid.gov, which is the landing page for federal student aid. And here on this page, it has all the information on all the different types of applications and programs that federal student aid runs. So to get to the FAFSA form from this page, you'll click on FAFSA form and you'll hit complete the FAFSA form itself. This pulls up the FAFSA landing page, and as a new student completing the FAFSA, you're going to click on the Start New Form option. So this next screen is where you're going to log into the FAFSA with your studentaid.gov account. You can create that account a few days before. You can create it minutes before logging into the FAFSA. There is not a waiting period to log in. You'll just want to make sure that you have your unique username and password already created so that you can log into the FAFSA. So logging in as a student, and when we do that, it gives us the option for student or parent. Something to notate here is that if you're a parent watching this video and your student has told you to go do the 26-27 FAFSA, you actually need to be invited if a student has already started it. And that will have a unique code for yourself, and that code can be entered here. So what you're going to see, the following screens are for a student starting it for the first time. All right, so our first page is giving us information on what exactly the FAFSA is. It's important to note that the FAFSA is only an application. It doesn't actually do anything. It does not award Pell Grant. It does not award student loans. It's the colleges who do that. So the FAFSA is just an application that takes into account some personal information that includes tax information. If you filed taxes, it also indicates if you did not file because you were not required to. Records of child support, amount cash savings and checking accounts for investments, businesses, farms, that type of thing. So this is a general overview, and if you have more questions in the form, you can always click on the videos that are embedded that pull up YouTube videos that explain it a little bit more from federal student aid. And then this explains what contributors are. So for dependent students, for financial aid purposes, they have to provide a parent or parent spouse. These are considered contributors. A contributor is never a widowed step-parent. It's never a grandparent unless grandparents legally adopted the student. It is never siblings. It is never a legal guardian. It is only biological or adoptive parents. And the contributor will be invited to contribute and log in with their own studentaid.gov account username and password within the form. And you'll see that in a second. It gives an overview about how long it takes to complete the FAFSA. So the FAFSA generally takes about 30 minutes for all parties, the student and contributors, to input their information. So it does not take long, and you can save it and go back to it in case the information is not something that you have on hand at the time. And it's important to note before you even log into the FAFSA what happens afterwards. So once a form is submitted, it does take 1 to 3 days for federal student aid to process it. At that time, the colleges do have it. And then the FAFSA submission summary is the end result that comes out of the FAFSA, which indicates the student aid index, which is the SAI number. That's a number that the colleges will use to determine the student financial aid eligibility. And the schools are the ones that process this information. So the next step after you've received that email from federal student aid, once you've submitted it in 1 to 3 days saying that your FAFSA has been processed, at that point you need to work with the colleges in order to work through any sort of questions or verification pieces that they may have to allow for them to award you your financial aid offer. All right, so because the student logged in with the studentaid.gov account, their personal information is already provided. As you can see, some information cannot be changed within the FAFSA form, and it directs the student to go to their account settings, which will be found in the upper right-hand corner when they log in to studentaid.gov. The permanent mailing address can be updated for the student. The next question is asking the student's state of residence, and usually this is the state where the student lives while not attending college. So for a high school student, this is the state that they're currently residing in. It pre-populates automatically from the mailing address that was provided for the page before and the permanent mailing address. Next question that they'll answer is the date the student became a resident of that state. And note that the gray text is there to help kind of clarify those questions. So make sure if you have questions about that on the FAFSA form, you either utilize that gray text and read it, or on the form, I'm using the prototype site to show you all, but on the live form, there's a little circle with an I in it. And if that is the case, then click on that and it will pull up more details for you to understand more specifics of what that question is asking if you are unsure. So if a student has not moved out of state since they were born, then it would be the month and year of their birthday as indicated by this gray support text. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm using what's called the prototype site provided by Federal Student Aid to kind of get an overview. But on the actual live form, you won't get this blue box. It will just come straight to the summary. So this is the consent page. It's very important that the student realizes that this is kind of that pivotal piece when completing the FAFSA. So you need to make sure that if you're the student watching this, that you understand that it is very important that you approve the consent, which essentially is allowing for the IRS and federal student aid to speak to each other to allow for your financial information, whether you filed taxes or if you didn't file taxes, that information to be shared between those two agencies. And so they can't share those information because they're two separate federal agencies unless you provide the consent and approval for that to happen. If you have questions, there are drop downs on the screen here that you can read through, but selecting approve provides consent and approval for the use of your federal tax information as determined by eligibility of your federal student aid. If you select decline, you won't be eligible for federal student aid. So it's already highlighted here as the approve, and so we really encourage everyone to approve for that direct data exchange transfer to make the FAFSA significantly easier. And as you can see, once you do that, it gives you that bar that indicates, oh, there's a transfer that's happening. And then we hope that you get this green screen that says success, you're confirmed with your information with the IRS. If for some reason you do not, and you get a red X here, and a red box, it may be that you have experienced identity theft, or there's just an inability to transfer that information, which would mean that you would just need to manually input the financial information. So your form would be a little bit longer than what you're going to see today, because this is what it looks like for a student who is able to get that information transferred from the IRS. All right, so the next section is personal circumstances. So we're going to ask some questions that helps determine eligibility if a student is considered independent or dependent on the FAFSA. It's important to know if a student is deemed dependent, then they have to provide biological or adoptive parent information. No other information can be used, so they can't use a legal guardian's information or a widowed step-parent. They can't use grandparents unless they legally adopted them. So let's go through these series of personal circumstances. It's asking the student's current marital status as of that day. Then it's asking when the student begins the 26-27 academic school year, what will their college grade level be? So it's important to note if you as the student did college credit while you were in high school, but you completed maybe dual enrollment or early college programs before you graduated high school, you're still considered a first-time freshman here. What they're really asking for is, have you enrolled in college before? So trying to determine that. And it's something to note that master's, doctorate, or graduate certificate programs would be an independent student variable here. So those that are working on graduate degrees are considered independent for financial aid purposes. So we're going to go through like we're doing it for a high school senior in this situation. And when the student begins the 26-27 school year, will they already have their first bachelor's degree, yes or no? So these list of personal circumstance questions are with the addition of age of 24 or older for the academic year, and if they're working on a master's degree. And then there's one additional homeless question that we'll see in a second, are the core questions that determine if a student is considered independent for financial aid purposes. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this page. If you already know that your student is dependent, you can kind of skip through the video a little bit further along. But if you are unsure, I'm going to dig into these questions for just a couple minutes. So the first question that we see is the student is currently serving as active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for the purposes other than training. It's important to know here that the student had to have attended and completed basic training. And if a student is involved with the National Guard or the Reserve, then in order to say yes to this personal circumstance, they have to currently have active duty orders. So just being a part of the Guard or the Reserve does not constitute yes here. The next is the student is a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. If the student has veteran status, then they can indicate that here. If you have a situation where maybe you, the student, are a veteran or you are an advisor working with students with veteran status, there's a lot more details around this on Federal Student Aid's website. So I encourage you to look that up for a little bit more details and kind of how that process will work. The next personal circumstance is the student has children or other people excluding their spouse who live with them and receive more than half of their support from the student now and between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. So the key here is that if you've got a student that you're working with or you yourself are currently pregnant, but the student doesn't live with you at the moment because you have not had the child yet, this question does not allow for you to say yes in that situation. The student or you, the student, need to have already had your child and they currently live with you and they will continue to live with you over the next academic year, and you will be the one providing the majority of the financial support. The next situation for personal circumstances is at any time since the student turned 13, they were orphaned with no biological or adoptive parent. So if you're a high school senior or you're working with high school seniors, it's important to note that the age 13 obviously happened several years ago. And so there may be a lot of life that has occurred between age 13 and 17 or 18 when you're a high school senior. So you have to dig a little bit into the past for this and the next two situations. But it's any time since the age turning 13. So since 13th birthday. If the student has been orphaned, the next one, at any time since the student turned 13, they were a ward of the court. At any time since the student turned 13, they were in foster care. So even if they have been adopted, or if in the foster care situation or ward of court are back with their biological parents, it is since the age of 13. So if that occurred in their past, they can say yes to these questions. They just need to make sure that they have some sort of documentation if they're selected for verification. The next one is the student is or was an illegally emancipated minor as determined by a court in their state of legal residence. So it's important to note here that they would need to be able to provide the colleges with this information. And oftentimes the colleges are going to be asking, if you select this and you're selected for verification as the student, those situations that led to the emancipation of a minor. So it could be that you, the student, were in an abusive situation and you were emancipated. So this is really going to be handled on a case-by-case basis if selected for verification. All right, the last that we see on the screen is the student is or was in a legal guardianship with someone other than their parent or step-parent as determined by a court in their state of legal residence. And so it's important to note here the key words that we want to pay attention to is legal guardianship. The words are very intentional on the FAFSA. It is not legal custody, and that is not the same thing. So generally, custody is a temporary passing of parental authority of a student, while guardianship is permanently changing those parental rights. And so that is why it says legal guardianship here. So if a student is in a legal guardianship, then they would select this and they would be independent on the FAFSA. Legal guardian's information would not be provided. If none of these apply, then they move on to one last question in this series, and that is student homelessness. At any time on or after July 1, 2025, was the student unaccompanied and either 1, homeless, or 2, self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? For your knowledge purposes, I'm going to select yes here. And I want you to see, did any of the following determine students was homeless or at risk of being homeless? So if this is a situation you, the student, or as an advisor, your student could potentially be in, it's something important to note is that we are looking for here a official determination. So someone that could speak to the colleges in a letter or an email stating that this is, that experience that the student has, and they can, authoritative figure can kind of vouch for that student experience here. A McKinney-Vento documentation in a traditional high school setting is usually the documentation that the colleges will look for, which is the homeless liaison from the school or school district provides that support documentation for the student who's under 18 that may be identified as homeless or at risk of being homeless. It's important to note that the student you would have to be unaccompanied. And so that means that you cannot be homeless with a parent. If you are homeless with a parent, then you can't say yes to this question here. And to define as homeless before we move on is inconsistent, reliable nighttime housing. So this is something to keep in mind. If that is you, then, speak with your counselor at your school or a trusted adult in your space, and hopefully they can get you the resources to allow for this to be a lot easier. All right, so the last situation is pretty unique. It's called student unusual circumstances. And so there's really these specific situations that a student can say yes to this one. The question is, do unusual circumstances prevent the student from contacting their parent, or would contacting the parent pose a risk to the student? And this is the list that the student would say yes. Unless they say that they've experienced these, they really can't say yes here. So the situations are left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, are abandoned or estranged from their parents, have refugee or asylum status and are separated from their parent, or their parents are displaced in a foreign country, are a victim of human trafficking, are incarcerated or their parents are incarcerated, and contact with their parent would pose a risk to the student, or are otherwise unable to contact or locate their parents. And if the student's circumstances result in not having a safe or stable place to live, then they may be considered for that homeless youth question that we saw in the previous section. So if they say yes to this, then it's talking about the student may be a provisional independent student or an unaccompanied youth. And so they need to work directly with the financial aid, and they need to contact the financial aid office as their next step and work with the college at the financial aid office through that provisional independent, and they are going to ask for some documentation that validates any of these situations here. So when you say no to the unusual circumstance questions, the next screen will show you the dependency status. Confirmation, which in this situation is a dependent student, meaning that we have to provide biological or adoptive parent information. And the next question that is presented to you, the student, is, are the student's parents refusing to provide their information on the FAFSA form? You can see that it defaults to no here, which is really important. And the gray text here kind of explains this response must be no for students to be considered for federal Pell Grant eligibility and most other types of federal student aid. So if you're watching this and your parents refuse to provide their information on the FAFSA, this is an alternative for you. But what would result in saying yes here is you would only be eligible to be awarded federal direct loans from the school. So that's the only federal aid, which I'm sure that you would like to try and avoid loans as best as possible. And so if you can work with your parent, or if you're an advisor watching this, my piece of advice is to do a lot of parent education here. It's important to know that parent refusal is not a reason that a student can be independent on the FAFSA. And so working with educating the parents, explaining, like you saw in those first few screens, what a contributor is, why contributor information is required, and hopefully now with the ease of the direct data exchange, transferring that information from the IRS or validating non-tax filer status, that would allow for it to be a lot easier for students and families as well. So we're going to say no to this question. We're going to provide parent info. So there's a few demographic questions that the student needs to answer about their background. So it's important to note this green box here. It's letting you, the student, know that it does not affect your eligibility for federal student aid. It's not used to calculate aid, and it's not shared with the schools that you've applied to. So the first question the student answers is, what is the student's sex? The next is a combined race and or ethnicity. And so there is the option to select more than one here for the student. So if they are biracial, they can select all that apply to them, and know that each one of these allows for there to be a little bit more details presented if the student would like to. There's also the answer that is an option of prefer not to answer. So the next question is citizen status of the student. So the options are U.S. citizen or national, eligible non-citizen, either U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. So an eligible non-citizen would have an A number or an alien registration number, and there are certain permanent residency or visa statuses. More details can be found on Federal Student Aid's website as to which one of these qualify to be an eligible non-citizen. There's some really specific visa status criteria, or if you have a green card or in the permanent residency situation, you can do a little bit more research there to determine if you could be an eligible non-citizen. The next question is about the parent education status, asking, did either of the student's parents attend college or complete college? And so this is based off best knowledge. The next is related to if the student's parents or guardians were killed in the line of duty, either one, serving as active duty as a member of the U.S. Armed Forces on or after the events of 9/11, or two, performing official duties as a public safety officer. And so that gray italicized text below gives a little bit more detail on a public safety officer. Includes law enforcement officer, firefighter, or emergency services worker. All right, so the high school completion status, asking what will the student's high school completion status be at the beginning of the 26-27 school year. So these are the options that are presented. If a student does not have a high school equivalency, then they're not eligible to receive federal aid in most cases. So just know that if you're a high school student, you need to indicate what your completion status will be, either GED, high school diploma, or if you were homeschooled, to begin the 26-27 academic year. So this is the prototype site. Again, I just want to show you there's a little bit of the live FAFSA will have just a few different search details that are a little bit different, but it's a pretty close replica of this. So I'm just going to select, you would type in your state, you would type in your city, and it will, kind of answer those. So we'll do this, and you can see it refines it as you type. And then you can type in your school name, or, it will give you that option, and then you'll select it, and then you'll hit continue. So it has some smart form pieces to it, so it kind of refines as you give those details. But you need to make sure you select and add it to confirming your high school here. All right, so the next section for the student is your finances. As we can see, because we did that direct data exchange and confirmed approved the consent earlier in the application, majority of the answers are presented here, but there are a few that either don't transfer or you would have to manually answer. And if the answer is 0 or a negative number, then you just put 0. If they don't have it, it doesn't apply to them, you got to put 0. So the first one is an IRA rollover into another IRA or a qualified plan. So if the student has some sort of IRA, the pension rollover into an IRA or other qualified plan would be if the student has a pension that's been rolled. The question here about the amounts of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS, there's a little bit more details here. This question is actually optional for the students on the FAFSA. So if they have this, then obviously they need to put that information, but they can skip this one. A little bit more details, if you think this applies to you as a student, I would encourage you to read that, or on the live form, click the I. That would give even more explanation. And then the last question that's presented here they have to answer is the foreign earned income exclusion. And this, you would go to the 1040 if they filed prior year taxes. Go to Schedule 1, line 8, D as in dog, and look there if there's any number. All right, so then the student is presented the asset questions. And so there are 3 categories of assets. It's important to note when reviewing assets that it's as of the day that the student completes and submits their section of the FAFSA. So the first category is these are only in student name, the amount and total of cash savings and checking. It's important to remember that this does not include student aid. This does not include retirement accounts or investments. So it's just purely liquid cash that the student has as of that day. The next category is investments. It's a little bit more robust, and this does include real estate. It does not include the home that the student lives in, so primary residence, and it's the net worth of the values of the investments minus any debts owed against them. So on the live form, there's an I button. I encourage you to pull that up because it lists it out. So this would be stocks, bonds, CDs, mutual funds, trust funds, UGMA funds. It would also include if the student has a 529 in their name, not that they benefit from it from an parent's name, but if they have it truly in their own name. It would also include if they have any investment properties in their name or additional secondary properties in the student's name. And then the last category is the current net worths of businesses and investment farms. So it's important to note that you do not include a family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees, and family farms where the family resides or a commercial fishing business related expenses are not included. So unless the student has a business with over 100 employees in their name, this is going to be a 0. All right, so then the next section is the college and career school. So this is where the student is going to list all of the places that they would like the FAFSA to be sent to. It's important to note that they can send it up to 20 colleges, and so that's great. If the student does this and they add colleges later, they can absolutely go back in and add them. They don't actually have to go through the full thing. On the FAFSA submission summary, which is when they log into studentaid.gov account, has their dashboard, goes to the 26-27 FAFSA, they can actually just add schools directly from there without having to redo or make a correction. So they can do this one of two ways. They can search by state, or they can enter the school code. Maybe the school sent them the school code and some promotional materials. Either way, they can add them through this page. So we'll search. They can either do the city or the school name. They have to provide the state. So we'll do this and hit search, and all of those will come up. Again, I'm on the prototype site, so this is not reflecting the information we've provided, but they would select if they want to search a new one. They would go back in here, they would update the search again, and it would pull up, they would add. So then it counts on the screen how many that they've added to their application, and once they've searched and added all of them, they review those. And for us in Mississippi, it does not matter the order that the schools are listed, but if you're watching this and you're not a Mississippi resident, you just need to double check. Some states, if you have state aid within your state, they do have a requirement where you have to put the state college as number 1. So just know that that's something you may need to pay attention to if you're not in Mississippi. All right, so we're going to invite a parent as a contributor because we know that the student is a dependent student. They're going to have a parent. This hyperlink here is a tool that's on federal student aid's website, separate out of the FAFSA, that would actually take the student into an interactive form to determine who should be invited. If their biological parents are not married to each other, then there's some determination on who provided the most financial support in the last 12 months. And then it needs to be that parent. And then if they are remarried, that step parent may need to be included here as well. And so once they determine, again, this links to that page, I want to show you what this looks like. So when you click on it, it pulls it up in a separate tab, and it's this interactive tool that helps the student determine which parent they should be inviting to be a contributor on the FAFSA form. So they would enter the names and work through this kind of flow chart experience. So if you're a student watching this and you're not quite sure, know that this is embedded in the FAFSA to help you. And then once you've determined the parent that you are going to be inviting to the FAFSA form, all you need is their email address. And once you put the email address in, and this could be your email, this could be their work email, their personal email, it does not have to necessarily match what is their studentaid.gov email address. They don't even have to have a studentaid.gov email created yet. They can be invited you'll see this invite is sent. It sends the invite, and then on that screen, this is the important information that they're looking for. What they need as the parent to contribute is this code, and this is their unique code to them as the parent. So if you're watching this and you're like, my student has started it, I'm not quite knowing what I'm looking for, I'll show you what that email looks like in just a second. But what you're really looking for is this unique code, and this code can be retrieved through your email when you log into studentaid.gov. It can be retrieved on the students. And so, no, this is a unique code that is unique to the parent, and that's what links the parent and the student sections together. All right, so the student's going to finish up by reviewing. If they need to make any changes to any of their information, they're going to then agree and sign and submit, saying everything they put in here is truthful and accurate to the best of their knowledge as of today. And they're going to sign the student section. But they're not done yet, right? Checking on their contributors. They're waiting on the contributors next. So this is what the email will look like that is sent to the parent to be a contributor. You can see that it kind of explains, hey, you've been identified for the student's FAFSA, and it directs them to accept the invitation. It also provides them that code that they'll need to copy when prompted. It's giving a brief overview of why they've been invited and what the FAFSA is used for and how schools will award the different types of federal aid. And if for some reason that email was fat-fingered and it was, transposed or something like that, they can decline the invitation if it was incorrectly emailed to someone else. Again, this has just any email address will work for the parent. So they're going to accept the invitation. If they haven't already created their studentaid.gov account, they can go ahead and create that and do that at this point, and then they'll log in to studentaid.gov and provide that copied unique code that's in the email or can be found in the student's account. We're going to move forward as logging in with the parent as they have created already their studentaid.gov account. This is that invitation code, and this gives a little bit of information here if in case they need to accept for a different year, so a different FAFSA, or they didn't get one, where they can find it. So once they do accept, there's a pop-up that comes up that says, are you sure? And they absolutely want to accept. So then it links them brings them into their student's FAFSA. There's a little bit of details here. I was like a parent contributor, what that means, what the FAFSA is, provides them a little bit more details for that parent education piece. There's going to be a lot of similarities that you're going to see from the student and the parents. FAFSA experience the parents is a little bit shorter, but there's some similar entrances. You can see the same screens that explain with the embedded videos that give a little bit more details from federal student aid and what to expect. Same information as far as the afterwards information where they can find that. So then it pre-populates because they logged in with their studentaid.gov account information. They're going to get that consent page to provide approval for the direct data exchange from the IRS to federal student aid, similar exactly the page as the student saw. So if you're a parent, this is what it looks like for you as you go in. You're going to approve, you're going to get that update status bar, and then hopefully you get that success. If you don't, it may be due to issues like identity theft in the past, and you'll have to manually enter it. But we're hopeful that you get the green check and the majority of the information is sent over. This also confirms, if you're a parent watching this or if you're a student, if your parents do not file taxes because they are not required to, it also validates that information as well. So there are a parent demographic section. They have to enter their current marital status as of the day that they complete the FAFSA. And then on the form, you're not going to see this, but it does show up on the live FAFSA. It does ask what is their kind of tax filing status from the prior year, and gives options that indicate if they married filed jointly. It also indicates if they have a foreign tax return, if they did not file. So there's an additional screen if you're looking at this, trying to figure out where you are on your FAFSA. Know that the live form has just like a little bit of additional information that this prototype site doesn't for the parents. Okay. So then it's parent state of legal residence, same information. It's the date that they became a legal resident of that state. And if they have lived there the whole life, then it is the month and year of their birthday. If not, it's the month and year that they became a resident. The parents only have 3 sections. So we've got demographic, we've got financials, and then we've got signature. So the financials section is important to note. The first one that's asked: at any time during the 24-25 did the parent or anyone in their family receive benefits from any of the following federal programs? So the family includes, as we can see here, the parents, spouse, children, or other dependents. And so in the last 2 years, so 24-25, any of these, anyone in the family received them. If none of them apply, then you would select none. So earned income credit, federal housing assistance, free or reduced price lunch at school, Medicaid, refundable credit for coverage under a qualified health plan, QHP, or a supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, supplemental security income, SSI, temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, or special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, or WIC. So if anyone in the family, as defined up here, received any of these the last 2 years, you would select however which many that they received. If none, then you would click none that apply. And then the next is a family size. Is a parent's family size different from the number of individuals claimed on the 2024 tax return? It's important to note that this information will automatically transfer from the IRS from the tax return. And so the gray text here is subtext is really important because it provides a definition of the family size. So family size includes the parent, their spouse, children, and other dependents in the home. Dependents are people who live with the parent and receive more than half of their support from them between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. This includes dependent children even if they live apart because of enrollment in college or career school. An example of family size changes includes a birth of a child or a child independent supporting themselves, such as that they are no longer considered a dependent student in the family. I would encourage you to just click on the form and double check this information that it transferred correctly. If this needs to be updated, then you can add that number in and move on with the updated number. But if the original number is correct, then you will want to keep it that way, click no, and move on. Next, they're going to answer how many people in the family will be in college between July 1, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. This never includes the student's parents, always include the student applicant, which it pre-populates already one there for that. It also includes the parents' other children or dependents if they will be in college during this time. And so this number can be updated. It is not used for financial aid calculation. It is just a data point that is collected. All right, so we've got a few financial information here that the parents need to answer. As we can see, just like we saw in the students section, it automatically gives us that update that the majority of the information has been transferred from the IRS, and there are a few things that they need to answer. The first is an IRA rollover into a qualified IRA or qualified plan. So if the parents rolled anything in an IRA for the prior tax year. If there's a pension rollover into IRA or a qualified plan. Did the parents receive earned income credit, which is on IRS Form 1040 line 27? Yes, no, or this is if they don't know. And then if the parent had amounts of college grant scholarships or AmeriCorps benefits reported as income to the IRS. So this is required for the parent section to answer, and so I'm going to read through this italicized subtext. People typically answer this question with 0 because most scholarships and grants, including federal Pell Grants, are not considered taxable income. If the parents are married, include the amount that their spouse reported. If the response is other than 0, the amount is typically not the same as the amount reported on the IRS Form 1098-T Box 5 or the adjusted gross income reported on the tax return. And so the live form has a little bit more details than that I. So if this is something that is applicable to you as the parent or as the student, your parent, make sure you do a little bit more information on Federal Student Aid site to answer this correctly. Then the last question is a foreign earned income exclusion, and this can be found on the 1040 Schedule 1, line 8D. So the parent has one additional question that they need to answer before they go into assets, and this is enter the total amount of child support the parent received from the last completed calendar year. So it definitely depends on when you're watching this video and when the calendar year you're currently in is, because the FAFSA opens in the fall and goes for a while. This could be a year ago, it could be 2 years ago, depending on when you're watching this. And so it's important to know it's the last completed calendar year and paying attention to that. And it's the total amount child support that has been received. All right, so next is parent assets. So same categories as the student, but parents oftentimes will have a little bit more details to think about here. So it's important to note for parents, it does not include anything saved in a formal retirement account. So a pension, 401k, IRA, a formal retirement account that has penalties if pulled for a certain age does not include here, okay? It also does not include primary residence. So if the parents own their home or have a mortgage on their home and the land that it's on, that does not count. Also, personal possessions do not count. So cars, boats, ATVs, jewelry, paintings, those type of items are not considered as assets. So with those removed from the brain, the parents need to answer the total of cash savings and checking accounts as of that day that they submit the form. The next category is a lot more robust, typically for parents. So reminder, does not include retirements here or their primary residence. So I encourage, if you are a student or you're a parent, to click on the I button on the live forum and read through what comes up, because this is going to be stocks, bonds, CDs, mutual funds. If you've got stock options for your company, the values as of that day. It's also going to include 529 college savings plans for your student. If you have that value, it's going to include trust funds that you have for your students. It's also going to include investment properties, even if they're under an LLC, or it's going to include secondary property. So if you own a beach condo or a second home, that value is the equity amount that you have. So the investment value minus debt owed against it is all going to be included in the number that you report here. And then lastly is that current net worth of businesses and investment farms. So you're going to enter the net worth of the parents' businesses and income producing farms. The net worth is the value of the business and farm minus any debts owed against them. Remember, you're not including in this number a family business with 100 or fewer full-time employees, or farms where the family resides, or a commercial fishing business with related expenses. All right, so that is all the information that the parent is going to need to provide. Now, if you are a parent who did married filed separate from your current spouse, or you didn't file taxes with your current spouse or biological parent of your child, but y'all live together, you need to make sure that you include their information. And so in the situation that I'm presenting on the screen, you're not given the opportunity to invite an additional contributor, but you may be based off of answers on the form that you've provided. So if you filed taxes separately from your current spouse or the other parent of your student, and you are required based off the information on the form to give that information, you'll need to invite them in the same way, just through their email, and then they'll go in and just answer their information, providing consent, making sure that their tax information is sent over. So it's a very simple for that third contributor, but there are a few situations that you may need to provide that third contributor. If you have questions on that, drop it in the comments, and we'll try and help you the best we can to answer that for you and guide you through what that looks like. We know everybody's situation is unique, so if you're the student or if you're the parent trying to figure that out, use the comments and we'll try and help you work through that. So the parent is signing and submitting, saying everything they put in here is truthful and accurate to the best of their knowledge as of today. And you can see that they get that submit button. While the student only got assigned, the parent gets a submit button. And so we get the confirmation page here. It's important to note that on the parent's last submission, so their last one that they submitted, they don't get any of the information as far as potential Pell eligibility or that SAI student aid index numbers, what the colleges use. It's the student that gets that. So there's been an email sent to the student. So the student, if you're doing this as a walkthrough side by side, you're going to get the email. And so that's where you're going to get the information that comes out of the FAFSA. You can also, as a student, log back in. So make sure you log as parent, log back in on the student aid. You can see in the upper right hand corner to do that. And that has a lot more details for you. And then once you get another email in a few days that your FAFSA has processed, the FAFSA submission summary is ready, and you can see there. So what happens next is that you need to know that the student will receive communication from the colleges. And from here, once the FAFSA has been confirmed via email that it's been processed, you're going to need to work directly with the college to process any financial aid questions that they have, or if you're selected for verification or anything like that. So this is the 26-27 FAFSA. Thank you for joining us. If you have questions unique to you, utilize that comment section below in the video. If you find this helpful, we do this annually, so make sure that you like and subscribe to our channel. And we hope that you have a great, successful FAFSA completion experience. And hopefully this was helpful.